Okay, let's go over this practice quiz. You're going to have a quiz on 1218, so make sure you understand these problems. Okay, it's only on 4.1 and 4.2, and this goes back to, just a review of what you did in Algebra 1. So if I give you a line, I want you to write a rule in slope-intercept form. All we need to know is the starting point, which is going to be a clear point along the y-axis. So in this case, my starting point, the B, is going to be at -2. Okay? Then it's up to you to be able to figure out the slope. Okay? So we need two nice dots, and then you just have to do rise over run. Okay? So we have this dot, and then we have this dot right here. So it's down 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the slope is negative because it's going downhill. 1 over 5. Once you have that, you can write your rule. So y equals -1/5 x minus 2 describes that line. Okay, if you need to, think of money. You start out in debt, owing $2, and you're spending $1 every 5 days. Okay, where this other one is going to be a positive slope. So we can clearly see it starts at a +1. And then we are going to be saving, let me find a nice dot, right here's a dot. So, and then I'll fill in these points so you can clearly see where you have two nice points. And then it's just a matter of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have to rise 5. And then once I go up 5, I have to go over 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's close to a slope of 1, but it's a little bit more than 1. You're saving $5 every 4 days. You write your rule, and you're done. Okay, so the slope always goes with the x, and then your starting point is the constant. Okay, so that's how easy it's going to be. I'm going to give you a graph. Like I said, I'll fill in the points so that you can tell how you're supposed to count. Okay, so then this next part, I will have 2 points for you. Here we're doing slope-intercept form, and for this part, I'm telling you the B. The B is when x is 0, the y value is the starting point. So right there, I know that B is -5. So now you need to know how to calculate the slope, and we have a little slope formula where we just subtract the y's, and then underneath the corresponding x values. Okay, so when you subtract your y's, it doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm going to start with -5, and I'm going to say -5 minus 4, but then I must start with this corresponding x. Since I started with this y, I must then put 0 minus -2. Okay, and again, if you need a calculator, use a calculator. You're going to have -9 over a +2. Minus a negative is a +2. So our slope is just -9/2. And that's all I need to do to write my rule. So I know my slope is -9/2, and my starting point was -5. Okay. So over here, my starting point is a 3. Okay, and you did this in Big Ideas. So that 4.1 Big Ideas was all about this. And once again, I just need to calculate the slope. So I'm going to take 3 minus -2, and then 0 minus -2. Okay, so I subtracted my y's. Underneath, I subtract my x. I get a 5 over 2. So this time it's 5/2. Y equals 5/2 x, and then my +3. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. And then our last page, 5 and 6, we are dealing with this point slope formula. And I will give it to you. So all you need to worry about is, you know that this right here, this x value goes in for the second x, this y goes in for the second y. And then my slope is 4/3. I'm going to clearly give you a point, and I'm going to give you the slope. All you have to worry about is saying y minus -1, and I'll clean that up, and then 4/3 x minus 3, that would be acceptable, but I'm going to write y plus 1 equals 4/3 x minus 3, and just leave it in that form. You don't have to solve for y. You don't need to get in slope-intercept form. You can leave it in point-slope form. Okay, so here's my x, here's my y, here's my slope. It's y minus the y value equals the slope, x minus the x value. And once again, I'll just clean this up a little bit. It's going to end up becoming x plus 2. And you're done. Okay, so expect 2 problems like that on your quiz where I give you a point and the slope and just substitute it into the proper location in the formula. Okay? And now this one, I don't tell you the starting point. So we're going to need to find the slope, and then we're going to need to solve for b. Okay? But we're just going to use y equals mx plus b. So the first thing we need to do is calculate the slope just like we did last time. I'm going to subtract my y's. So 1 minus negative 5. And then underneath, I subtract the x's. Do not mix them up. Okay? And don't make a calculation mistake. You're going to have a 6 over a positive 2. Okay? And again, if you need a calculator, the calculator can calculate these values. So if you struggle with calculations, -1 minus -3 is going to be a 2, and 6 over 2 is a nice slope of 3. Okay, so we know y equals 3x plus b. I take either point, doesn't matter which point I use. I'm going to take this first point, I'm going to replace the y with a 1, and I'm going to replace the x with a -1, and we're going to solve for b. So again, this goes back to chapter 1 where we did one-step equations, and just like that, I'll know that b is 4, and once I know my slope and I know my starting point, I know my rule. Okay? And if you really wanted to check to make sure you did this correctly, I can take this x value, substitute it into my rule. 3 times -3 is -9. -9 plus 4 is that outcome of -5. So we need to make a rule that works for both points. If I plugged in a -1, I get an outcome of +1. And it works only for this rule. Okay? So same thing for this one. I'm going to subtract my y's, and then I'm going to subtract my corresponding x values. So here we get a -8. On the bottom, we're going to get a -1. Overall, 2 negatives make a positive. So this line, if you would plot these points, you would see that it goes uphill if you connect the points. So once again, we know our slope. What we don't know is our starting point. So this time I'm going to use this point. This point looks a little bit easier. It doesn't matter which one. So I'm going to replace the y with a 3, and I'm going to replace the x with a -3. This is -24. All I have to do is add 24, and I'm going to get 27, and that's my b value. So if I have my slope and I have my starting point, we have our rule. Okay? And again, I would take 2 seconds to double check. I'll check this on a calculator. 8 times my input of -4. Okay, so I'm going to input a -4. Then I'm going to add 27. I hit enter. This better be -5, and it is -5. It works for both points. Same thing with -3. 8 times -3 is -24, plus 27 is a +3. Okay? So then the last part is just getting you used to this function notation. Is identical to 7 and 8. Okay? It's the same. The only difference, I used function notation. There's my input, there's my output. So x, y, I'll just write it as an ordered pair. So it really means that. Okay, so I still need to find the slope like I did for the other problems. I'm subtracting my y's, and then I'm going to subtract my x's. So -4 minus 1. Up top, we're going to get a +10. In the bottom, we get a -5 for an overall slope of -2. So y equals -2x plus b. take either point, it doesn't matter which one. I'll just take this one. I'll replace the y with a 1, and my x is a -4. So 1 equals 8 plus b. I subtract 8, and just like that, I know my starting point is -7. So this time I'll just, instead of using a y, and again, if you use a y, I'm not going to mark it wrong, but I'm going to say f of x. Okay, remember f of x, that function notation means your outcomes given a certain input is -2 times your input minus 7. Okay, so if I input a 1, -2 times 1 minus 7 is -9. If I input a -4, I get a +8 minus 7, which is a +1. So that is the rule for these inputs and outputs. And finally, the last one, I give you 2, 2, and I give you -4, -1. Just broke my pencil. And I find the slope, 2 minus -1. Just be careful of minusing a negative. Okay, so we're doing the difference between the y's, and then I'm going to do the difference between my x's. Okay, so in this case, we get a +3. In the bottom, we get a 6, which really just means a slope of 1/2. Okay, so that's easy to deal with. And I'm just going to take, I'll use 2, 2. That seems super easy. I replace the x and y with 2's, and we solve for b. Okay, so 2 equals half of 2 is a 1. I subtract 1 on both sides, and I'm going to get b is 1. So our rule should be 1/2 x plus 1. And again, just double check. If I take half of -4, it's -2. -2 plus 1 is -1. If I plugged in a 2, half of 2 is 1. 1 plus 1 gives you the outcome of 2. Okay? So that practice right there, these 10 questions, is everything you're going to need to know to do well on your exam. So practice this. Make sure you have your 4.1 and 4.2 packets done. Look back over it. Try some problems in the packets. Go back, look over the 2 big idea assignments, and you should be more than ready to do well on this exam. Okay? So thanks for watching. Make sure this is complete. You'll hand this paper in with your exam. Take care.